See what was difficult, what was not, what was clear, what was not. Okay, Premise.
Sorry, quick question. How much time did we have for each test since I've missed the class?
Okay, so each test takes 20 minutes.
20 minutes per test. Okay, cool.
Yeah, exactly. So these two tests all in all take 40 minutes. 40.
Mm-hmm. Both tests are 40 minutes. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and you basically do them in one session to make your experience more kind of realistic, because you won't have 9 questions per test. You'll have 26 questions. So here, to make it more specific and topic bound, it's just 18 questions, but still it's better to do 18 rather than 9 and 9. That's it.
Right.
All right, so let's get started. And we get started with the case called The Future of Mobility. This case comes from McKinsey Quarterly. So if you want to practice reading this complicated business English, go for it and grab some McKinsey Quarterly reports. It comes from there. Question one. Question one. Actually, everyone got question one wrong. That's interesting, because I thought it's not that difficult. Let's have a look at it now. What we're going to do right now is solve this question right away. Grab your pens, take your time, 2-3 minutes, now mark your answer, and then we discuss. Of course, I can tell you the right answer right away, but that would be too boring, I think. Let's first try and tackle it without knowing the right answer. I think some of you messaged me. Let me check. Okay. C. Very good. Tasha chose C. Other opinions? D. And this is the choice of Anton. Okay. Okay, got it. Now here comes Gregorio. D. Awesome. Gotcha. Other opinions? Other options? And recall, guys, that we're talking about least helpful option. Least helpful option. All right, guys, time's up. Let's discuss. Anton, tell me, what do we need to do in order to identify which mobility trajectory is applicable to a certain area, to Los Angeles or some other area? How do we do that?
Well, I think you first need density of population, which is number of inhabitants by the space the city occupies.
Yeah, or total area. Yep. This all comes from this exhibit, right? Density is one criterion. Per capita income is another criterion, right? So based on these two factors, we can figure out what mobility trajectory is applicable to any place. For example, if Los Angeles falls in here, based on per capita income and density, we say that it's private autonomy. If, I don't know, Mumbai falls in here, we say it's clean and shared. And if New York falls in here, we say it's seamless mobility. Okay, yep. That's true. Now we need to examine the options and say, well, which option brings least information to the table. And we need per capita income and density. Yep, here we are.
Well, if you don't mind, let's start with option B.
Okay, okay.
Benchmarking of average annual income per citizen in LA gives you an idea where it should be on the vertical axis.
Right you are, right you are.
Benchmarking the US Census results for LA with total area gives you an idea where it should be on the horizontal axis.
That's right. Census gives us population figures, and then total area is, well, the area, and then we divide the population by area, and we end up with density. That's it.
Then option A, which is population by appropriate income bracket, again gives us an idea where it is on the vertical axis, because
kind of, but there's a trick here actually. I would put a dash mark here, but we're going to discuss it in a moment. Let's go to D now.
Okay, and then D is like household expenditure plus savings, then divided by average household size. I don't really remember whether expenditure plus savings is your like income.
It is. Well, because there is nothing else, right? You can either spend your income or you can save it. Not many options left. Actually, just two options. What you can do it. You can spend it or not spend it.
Okay, but then kind of D is still like helpful or meaningful.
D, well, it does not talk about density, right? So density is out. But per capita income, can we come up with a per capita income figure based on income per household and household size?
Well, yes, you divide one by another.
That's right. Yep. So the tricky part is here. I think everything else so far is clear, right? Unless it is, stop me and ask questions. All right. So here comes the tricky part now. Appropriate income bracket. So what is an income bracket? Income bracket is a range of incomes which is occupied by a certain, so to speak, by a certain number of people. For example, from 0 to 50K per year, from 50K to 100K per year, and then 100K to, well, infinity. So the biggest bracket would probably be this one. Then this one is quite small actually, even though we are the lucky ones who usually fall in this category. Well, some of us actually fall in here, but those are the very, very lucky ones. That's where 1%, which is so tiny, right? And I say that, for example, 5 million people are here, 1 million people are here, and, well, 0.1 million people are here. I just made up the numbers, but it doesn't matter. We just need to understand the mechanics behind it, right? Based on these numbers, will you be able to come up with average income?
Isn't it because we're looking at the, are we looking at the global? I mean, there is probably some purchasing parity as well, or not? I mean, because we just can't put everyone into the same bracket, because if you look at the worldwide population with this impact as well.
Well, good point about worldwide population, because yeah, we would need to make some different comparisons and probably account for the Big Mac index
exactly
parity. Yeah, that's true, but I think that's not the major point here. Suppose we've done that. Suppose our comparison, our per capita income comparison is meaningful at all. So because what you're saying is that we would need the Big Mac comparison and stuff. That would make our whole axis, per capita income axis, invalid. But here, let's assume that the axis is okay. So this comparison makes sense worldwide somehow. But we just need to come up with a number for per capita income for a specific metropolitan area, for example, Los Angeles.
So that means I have completely misread the option A, because I thought like benchmarking of the LA population, like it would, like, you know, the whole LA would fall into a certain bracket, and this bracket would be either like high per capita income or low per capita income.
Ah, okay, I see your point. Well, if it were so, if you were to interpret option A as you did, then it would definitely not give us per capita income, because it would be too imprecise. There would be lots of people in one place, lots of people in another place, and we won't be able to say what income exactly we have per capita.
Well, okay, you're right. Option A is the least meaningful.
Let me elaborate on that a bit further. The problem with this classification right now with those brackets is that the sizes of the brackets are quite large, right? And there is even one open bracket, most likely. Of course, we are not given that the brackets are necessarily from 0 to 50, from 50 to 100, from 100 to infinity. I just came up with those numbers. But brackets in general mean some ranges, and ranges are pretty large. In order to come up with a single number for per capita income from here, we would need to take the average here, and average here. But the problem is we don't know the real average, because we don't know the distribution of incomes in this bracket, in this bracket, and in this bracket. The distribution of the average could be somewhere here around 20K, or it could be somewhere here around 40K, or it could be somewhere else. Same thing for 50-100 bracket. Same thing for 100+ bracket. We don't know where the actual average lies. Now, if we lived in some ideal mathematical world where the size of the bracket would actually be 1, we would have lots and lots of small, very, very small brackets. In this case, understanding per capita income would be pretty simple, right? We would just need to take the area, right? And then divide it by the total number of people. But it would work in our case, because our case is not abstract one size range. The range is quite large. So integration or something won't work. That's why we won't be able to dig per capita income out of this big thing, out of this income brackets, out of these income ranges. So that's why A yields the least helpful information. A does give us density, and A does really give us per capita income, because we don't have enough data to judge. So based on this information, A is actually the worst option. And that's exactly what we're looking for. That's exactly the least helpful option. So the answer is A here. Your questions, guys. Well, small comment. I would say that this question is actually on the difficult side of things. So a typical PST question would be much simpler, but I think you might need to be prepared for these things, especially in the interviews, but also in the more tricky test questions.
So the whole trick was about income bracket.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. That's right, because everything else follows pretty much in a straightforward fashion.
Right.
All right, guys. Question 2. Question 2, Anton, Pavel, and Natasha got it right. Okay, Tasha, your turn. Please guide us through question 2.
Yeah. So, what do we have here? Which of the following statements, if true, would best support the team's belief about the use of self-driving cars in densely populated metropolitan areas in developing countries in the near future? So, first thing to note is if true and would best support.
Yep, agree.
And then what I did, I went to the text and look at the self-driving cars in densely populated metropolitan areas and developing countries.
Yeah. Good.
I look, at this, what it says there. And then when I looked at the answers, so my answer is C. According to Google's latest empirical research, the software behind self-driving cars fails twice as often when the composition of car fleet in the metropolitan areas is not homogeneous. And then in text, we can see that, yes, under clean and shared, you see that because of poor infrastructure, interference from pedestrians, a variety of vehicles on the road, and a lack of clear adherence to traffic regulations. So this, poor infrastructure then gave me, this answer that lots of cars could fail.
Tasha, I think you're right, but let me put some more context into this question so that we understand how to tackle similar questions in the future. First thing, you rightly noted that this is a true question, which is a premise question. In a premise question, first thing we need to understand what the question fact is. What is this thing that we need to prove or disprove, right? And this thing is the opinion or the belief of the team regarding self-driving cars in a certain area. So first thing, we need to establish what the belief is so that we can either prove it or disprove it. Here we need to prove it. And as you rightly stated, we go to the first paragraph, first bullet rather, and then read what this opinion is. And this opinion is, the widespread use of self-driving cars may not be an option in the short term because 1, poor infrastructure. 2, interference from pedestrians. 3, a variety of vehicles on the road. And 4, a lack of clear adherence to traffic regulations. Those are the 4 things that they use in order to support their opinion. So right now what we need to do, we need to dig into the options and figure out which option supports at least one, or better, 2, 3, or 4 of these ideas. So we say 1, 2, 3, 4. And let me remind you once again what 1, 2, and 3, 4 stands for. 1 stands for poor infrastructure. Let me write that down. Of course, in a real test, you don't need to write that down, right? But I'm writing it here so that we don't get lost. Infrastructure. Pedestrians is number 2. interference from pedestrians. 3, variety of vehicles on the road, and lack of clear adherence to traffic regulations. Traffic regulations, and I'm going to cross it out, meaning lack of clear adherence. So let's now look through the options one by one and see if each particular option supports any of these ideas. Infrastructure, pedestrians, interference, vehicles on the road, and then traffic regulation. A, what does A support? Does it support anything?
Nothing.
That's right, nothing. A does not support the idea of the team. Well, why A in general might be something useful in general, but this is not something the team uses in their discussion. So this is not something you would be able to put on a slide explaining your logic. So A is out. B, what about B? Does B support anything?
I think the second and the fourth option.
Pedestrians. You think pedestrians? Interference from pedestrians?
Surveillance road. Oh, sorry, improving the traffic. Only for
traffic regulation. Well, interesting point. Tasha, you wanted to say something, please go ahead.
Yeah, so here we said the traffic surveillance routine and adherence to traffic rules. So is it the number 4? So number 4 is a lack of clear adherence to traffic regulations, but the statement is just the opposite.
You're right, but not exactly the opposite.
I mean, it's developing countries and developed countries, right? So here it talks about developed.
Yeah, developing is fine. The problem is with comparison of change and status quo. So right now the status quo is lack of clear adherence to traffic regulations. This is what 4 is saying. What B is saying rather is that traffic regulation surveillance routine is improving. The fact that the routine is improving does not mean that right now traffic regulation is poor. Traffic regulation could be outstanding and is still improving. Or it could be awful and still improving. Or it could be outstanding and not improving. Or it could be outstanding and not improving or improving. So there is change on one hand and there is current situation on the other hand. B is talking about change. 4 is talking about current situation. So it's not actually a contradiction. It's rather different things that they talk about. So that's why I put a cross here. So B seems to be relevant as well. What about C?
One. So it supports 1, poor infrastructure.
Why does it support infrastructure?
No, it does not support. So it supports the statement poor infrastructure because it says that that we have the self-driving cars fails twice as often when the composition. So we don't have the software and so on ready yet.
Right, but I would say that it's not actually about infrastructure, but rather about the design of the car fleet, the composition of the car fleet. The composition of the car fleet is not homogeneous. That means that there is a variety of vehicles on the road, right? That's just a synonym. So C would actually support this idea that the variety of vehicles on the road matters and matters to a negative extent. I would put a cross everywhere except for 3. And 3, there's a tick mark. And then Z. What about Z?
Nothing.
That's right, nothing. There is some talk about some kind of private cars, but private cars right here are just irrelevant. So that means we have a lot of crosses here, really lots and lots and lots of crosses, and there is only one tick. But this one tick is exactly where the answer is, right? And this is what you chose. Thank you, Tasha. I think your logic is correct and good, but I just added some thoughts in this explanation to make sure we understand how to solve these questions in general. So kind of a bit of context, but your logic is pretty correct. Questions? Oh, right. All right. No questions so far. Question 3. Question 3 goes to whom? To Valentin. Your turn, Valentin. Please explain question 3.
Okay, we'll try to. Which of the following statement, if true, will not explain why the team believes electric vehicles will be more common in developed dense areas than in developing dense areas?
Okay.
I just, frankly speaking, I didn't able to read carefully text. I just start to read options. If I'm understand that I'm wrong, but it was the reality.
That's right. But in general, in order to address this question properly, you would need to go into parts of text which talk about developed dense areas and figure out what they say about electric vehicles, what the team says. Then you would need to go into the part talking about developing dense areas and see what the team says about electric vehicles, which is a bit time consuming, but that would be the proper way to do this. However, there is a small trick in this question which would lead to a specific answer just popping out as the right one versus everything else. And this is just small detail that you need to pay attention to and which highlights the right answer. Okay, go ahead, Valentin. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the statement of the question, the negative one, so will not explain.
Yep.
And which popped out before my eyes, that option B is definitely not supporting it.
That's right, but why?
Just because I didn't understand what option A said to us, but if I read carefully option B, it looks that electric vehicles are more expensive than traditional cars, and poor population of developing suburban areas cannot afford to buy them at scale. So it's just a statement which is not connected to the supporting of the mass selling electric vehicles in developed areas.
Yeah, I will be a bit more precise here by saying that this statement is about suburban areas. It's irrelevant to our discussion because it's about suburban areas and not about dense areas, not about developed dense areas or developing dense areas. It's just out of context. It's not about what we're discussing. Everything else somehow can be related to what the team is saying in one episode, in one paragraph or another paragraph. But B is just out.
So just because option B talking about suburban areas which are not in the field of our not in the context.
Yes. That's right. That's right. I think option A requires some explanation because it also seems irrelevant. What option A is saying that is that electric vehicles equals self-driving taxis. Seems irrelevant, right? But from from second question and from our previous discussion, we know that self-driving cars may not be an option based on the team's belief. In where? In developing dense areas. So if self-driving cars may not be an option, then self-driving taxis may not be an option in developing dense areas. And that would explain why electric vehicles may not be an option in developing dense areas, and why electric vehicles would be less widespread in developing dense areas than in developed dense areas. So this is kind of transitivity result. This is one thing, this is another thing, and then by transitivity, we claim that electric vehicles will not be really common in developing dense areas. Is it clear so far? I'm going to write transitivity. Transitivity. For those of you guys who like math, that should be a pretty familiar concept. Questions?
So does it often happen in this type of questions that it's really this one word that we really need to be looking for, that's maybe in contradiction to the question?
Yeah, I think it does. I won't be able to give you exact percentage of situations like that, but in general, the test is about attention to detail, right? You need to pretty much understand what's going on and then see specific markers, specific red flags that say that, well, this option does work, this option does. So this detail is one of the red flags, and you need to be used to searching for this red flag. So I would say, yeah, it's pretty common. And not necessarily in premise questions only. It's also a common thing in conclusion questions or in fact questions where you need to do some calculations. Especially helpful is when you understand that calculation is redundant because you're not able to calculate something because you don't have the data. That would be an example of this kind.
Okay. But in this type of question as well, I mean, you kind of have to read the text that is in the first box, or I mean, you need to skim it, of course, but if just these one word details are so important, then you kind of have to understand the text well as well and not just skim it through. But probably you don't really have that much time.
Well, that's a fair point, but I would say that it's more important, way more important, to read the questions carefully and to read the options carefully. This is something you cannot skim. This is something you need to dig deep into and understand what's going on, understand all the nitty-gritty details of the options. While with text, as I said last time, I think you can skim the text, understand what's going on, and then, if necessary, go back to the text and dig out necessary information. But here, with options, you need to read them carefully, all the time, every time, because this is where the devil, which is hiding in the details, is usually hiding.
Okay, thanks. This makes sense, yeah.
Yep. Anything else to add?
No.
Okay, not yet. Then let's move on so that you guys don't get bored. In high port, at your service. Question 4. Question 4, pretty good results. Pavel, Maria, Anton. Okay, I would ask Pavel this time. Pavel. Okay, Pavel's not here. I will ask Anton.
what would best explain the difference in the average number of containers?
Okay.
Let's start with option B. The number of large volume customers versus small volume customers.
Let's first figure out what the question fact is. Something we need to prove or disprove.
Well, it's the first and the third ports, and the number of containers they handle monthly is pretty similar. But
yeah,
sorry, the number of customers they have, but the number of containers different. There's significant difference.
Okay, agree. So what we're gonna say is customers similar. I mean number of customers, and number of containers different. Very good. This is something we need to prove. This is something we need to explain because it looks weird. Number of customers and number of containers should be pretty much similar, right? Let's now look at different options.
So B with large and small volume customers. Seemed irrelevant to me. Now I start thinking.
Well, B is an interesting option, but the punchline of B is that we don't know anything from B.
Yes, I think this was my takeaway. Like the table doesn't really give us a hint towards high and low volume customers.
It's not about high and low. The problem is that in B we don't know the absolute numbers. We compare large volume customers with small volume customers. Okay, we don't know what large volume and small volume are, but that's okay, at least for now. At least for now, we're just saying that someone ships a lot more containers than someone else. This someone who ships lots of containers is called large volume customer. The customer who ships few containers is called small volume customer. We don't know the numbers, but so far that's not too important because there is something else that impedes our problem solving here. And this something is comparison of large volume to small volume. Because this comparison is just useless. Let me give you an example. So suppose this is Qinghai port, suppose this is Maohai port. What B is saying is that Qinghai port has 35% lower number of large volume customers versus small volume customers of Maohai. Now, suppose
I think we can talk only about averages based on the table. I think based on the table, we can say that on average, customers are bigger in Qinghai than in Maohai, but the exact numbers are unknown.
Yeah, but we need to prove the claim that on average the customers are bigger. That's right. But B does not prove this claim. That's the problem with B. I'll explain to you why it does not prove the claim that Qinghai customers are big. Now, suppose that Maohai has a lot of small volume customers, really lots and lots of small volume customers, and very few large volume customers, okay? We know from B that the number of large volume customers in Qinghai is 35% lower than small volume customers in Maohai. So that would be large volume customers, which is smaller than the number of small volume customers. But because the number of small volume customers in Maohai is still large, the number of large volume customers in Qinghai would be still a big number, even though it's smaller than this number. But then it would say that there are much more large volume customers in Qinghai than small volume customers, and that would explain that the average size of a customer in Qinghai is bigger than in Maohai, which is kind of the desired result, right? This is exactly what we would need to prove, because that would mean that the number of customers is the same, but the number of containers is different. Are you following?
I'm not sure. Are you trying to give an example of a situation where the claim of B would be false?
Again, this is a premise question. We assume that everything here is true. So we're assuming that B is true. So the claim of B is true. What I'm saying is that I'm giving an example where B would lead to this result. And then I'll give an example where B would lead to a contradictory result. And because B could lead both to an affirmative explanation and to a negative explanation, I would say that B is useless. B does not give us information that we need.
So let's just take an extreme situation. There's one customer at Qinghai port that sends like 40,000 containers, yeah, and then the rest customers send 10,000.
Yeah, that would also work, but that would not follow from B, because from B we have a specific ratio of people. So your extreme example would translate into, for example, 12,000 small volume customers and almost, well, I don't know, 9,000 large volume customers in Qinghai. What you were saying is also possible, but this is not something that would follow from B. I'm now looking at scenarios that would follow from B. From B, it might follow that there are a lot of large volume customers in Qinghai. If there are a lot of small volume customers in Maohai. But if we're taking an opposite example, which could also follow from B, in which there are really few small volume customers in Maohai, and that means that even fewer large volume customers in Qinghai. So that would mean that Qinghai has a lot of large volume customers. Sorry, Maohai has a lot of large volume customers, and Qinghai has a lot of small volume customers. But this situation, which also follows from B, actually contradicts what we're seeing in table, because that would suggest that the number of customers is the same, but the number of containers for Qinghai is much smaller than the number of containers for Maohai, which is not the case here. So because B could lead both to the question fact and to the opposite of the question fact, we're saying that B, well, actually puts us into an uneasy situation. We don't know what the real state of affairs are. So B does not really give us any useful results. That's why B is out.
Can we spend a couple more minutes? So let's say on average, a customer of Qinghai port sends what, 4 containers a month, right? And the customer of Maohai port sends like 3 containers a month.
No, we cannot make this assumption so far. Okay, because these assumptions might not necessarily follow from B. We need to devise scenarios which would be in agreement with the option, with each particular option that we're discussing. If we look at option B, we need to come up with a scenario that would agree with B.
So, okay, there are 1,000 large volume customers in Qinghai.
Okay. The total number is 13K everywhere, more or less, 13 and 12K. But yeah, let's say the same number. So Qinghai, you're saying 1,000 large volume customers. So the rest are small volume customers. Okay.
Yeah, and then in Maohai it's 35% more, right?
Well, not 35, because it's actually something like 40% more, because 35 is out of this number.
Qinghai is 35 lower than the number of.
Yeah, 35 lower does not mean 35 higher. So
yeah, okay. So then Maohai 100 and then Qinghai 65.
Yeah. Okay. Or rather 1,000.
1,650.
Yeah, that's right. But notice that we're talking about large volume here and small volume here. So they're different.
Why?
Because this is what the option is saying, and this is why the option is
okay.
Small volume, large volume. This is what where the contradiction comes from.
Okay.
Because we're comparing different things.
Okay, now I think it's more visible.
Yeah, because we don't know the number of small volume customers and large volume customers, we can say we have few small volume customers in Maohai, or we can say we have many small volume customers, really a lot of customers. Then the number of large volume customers here would also increase. And this is where the contradiction.
So basically, if it were true, it would still explain nothing.
Yeah, because it could explain the question fact, or it could explain the opposite of the question fact.
Okay.
So that's why we can say that B explains nothing, because it explains two contradictory things.
Then let's move to option C.
Okay, yeah, let's move to option C. And
I don't. I mean, in option C, I would say I don't understand how longer working hours and fewer holidays are explaining this difference.
Well, it explains the number of containers, the difference in the number of containers, right? But it does not explain the difference in the number of customers. Because if you work more, you would assume that you would get more
both numbers
containers and more customers.
But you know the well, the revenue is different. So for me, it's not clear how option C would explain the difference.
Well, if you work more, you will process more containers, right? Unless you have lower efficiency, of course.
Well, you have just two very different ports. One port is much bigger than the other one.
Yeah.
So different working hours wouldn't really add much value to it. I mean, if you have two identical ports and one port works longer hours, then yes, it processes more containers. But we don't really know whether they are similar ports.
Okay, so what you're saying here is not a tick but a cross. Even so, that would be even better, because we know that it does not explain the number of customers being almost equal. Then okay, it does explain the number of containers, we are fine with that. It just crosses C out. anyways.
Then a tip, well, D is easy to cross away because it can compare skin high and chunk high, and we are interested in skin high and mao high.
It's just irrelevant. So D is out. So we're left with A, actually.
We're left with A.
And, well, A is the right answer because everything else is the wrong answer. But here, by the way, is a good example of how you can need to skim the text and then go back to the text if necessary. You read option A and see that there is some strange apparel and electronics manufacturers. You don't know what that means. That might be totally irrelevant, or that might be relevant. How do you know? You recall that while reading the text, you notice different customer types. And what you need right now is go back to the text and read more carefully that passage about customer types and see if it brings any value. And once you read that, once you read the last sentence specifically, you'll figure out that this paragraph does bring value and it's actually shed some light on what's going on in option A. And it explains that manufacturers of consumer goods are actually large volume customers. And then apparel and electronics are small volume customers. So what A is actually saying is that Kinhai services customers who ship more. Which would be a pretty good explanation of what's going on in table 1. Number of customers is the same, but because of the customer mix, Kinhai processes more containers. That would be a decent explanation. And again, you skim the text, you just mark somewhere that a certain passage talks about different customers, but you don't know the specific customers and the details. That's fine. You go to the question, you read the question carefully, and then you understand that something is missing from your understanding. And this something is the understanding of customers. You go back to the text, you read it more carefully, this specific passage about customers, and you understand what types of customers we're dealing with, and you use this information in option A to figure out that it's the right one. So that would be the approach to skimming and digging out information in this question in particular. All right, that was a tricky one. Questions, guys?
I have a question, please.
Yes.
So I chose the option C, and I can explain why. It was natural for me that long hours and less holidays gives, as a result, more containers.
Okay. Okay, I could agree with that.
And it was. I also suppose that the number of customers could be similar or comparable, just because of like geographical nature of the port and everything else. So the customer chooses the port which is closer, or by all other reasons which are not clear for us but clear for customer, why they choose the port. And I do not see any contradiction between difference of the number of customers at the moment.
Well, so, okay, C does not explain number of customers. C explains the difference in the number of containers, that's right, but C does not explain the difference in the number of customers, which is almost absent.
Well, now it sounds not too illogical for me. If they work longer hours, the average client like brings more containers in.
But why not more clients?
Of course, client choose the port not because of the hours of the working hours.
Well, but this is not something stated in C. C does not say this. From C, you could only reasonably conclude that there will be more containers. But you would, along the same lines, conclude that there should be more customers, ceteris paribus. But what we see in table 1 is that there is not more customers. There are not more customers. So that's why C is definitely weaker than A, because C, other things being equal, leads us to a wrong conclusion, that there should be more customers, but there are not more customers.
But isn't it, I mean, the number, we can't say that the number of customers, so one customer equals one container. It can be as well that the same customer has 5 containers or something like that. So that would explain that we have the same number of customers, but we have more containers. So, and well, because we are working longer hours, we can actually process them.
But that would explain different. Well, the thing is that if we have different number of containers and same number of customers, we would need more containers per customer. Mm-hmm. But longer hours do not necessarily explain more containers per customer. Long hours explain more containers or more customers. Mm-hmm. But C does not explain the nature of customers who come to us. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. Like, once I read it again, then after that, it was really these electronics manufacturers and apparel. And if you would read the text carefully, this sentence that you underlined, it would be the only logical answer. Yeah, but you just need to connect the dots between the text and...
You're right. And this is why, while you read A, you might say that, well, some dots are missing. Some dots are missing, and I know that because there is something about apparel and electronics manufacturers, and I don't know who the heck are apparel and electronics manufacturers. And then you understand that there was something in the text about customers in general, and you go back to that passage and you read it more carefully. And you understand that, well, there is a difference actually, and there are different types of customers, and apparel and electronics manufacturers are actually small volume customers, and consumer goods are actually large volume customers. And this is how you discover those dots and you connect those dots.
Yes.
Victor, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead.
In terms of option A, it's a little bit unclear to me. So this option, how I understood, explains the time that actually they spent when they serve their manufacturer. So the basic explanation is they work lower than their competitor. That is why they have more number of containers in their... Huh?
Are you talking about option C?
No. I'm talking about option A.
But option A does not talk about time.
But it's 50% lower. So yeah, this is
the number of manufacturers is 50% lower. So it's not about time. It's about.
So it's a number of manufacturers. But how they actually that can explain that they have higher number of containers in their production cycle?
Because the clients that they serve ship more containers. So you have a different client mix. You have a mix where there are more clients who ship more. So even though the total number of clients, the total numbers are the same across the two ports, the composition of those clients, the composition of the clientele is different across the ports.
I see. Okay.
All right. I suggest we move on so that you guys don't get bored with question 4. Question 5. Question 5. well, no one gave the right answer to question 5.
I can try to answer it since I missed the class anyway.
Yep.
All right.
Why don't you try to solve it right now? Yeah, please go ahead.
Sure. So which of the following analyses, if done alone, would be least helpful in identifying the root cause of the problem the senior management of Qinghai Port is facing? Yeah. So the problem that they're facing is decreasing revenues while being on par with their competitors and many other kind of criteria. So yeah, so the revenues, and then the pressure from the government is really just a consequence of this. Yeah. So yeah, the biggest problem is falling revenue. Now, question option A says analysis of change in storage, loading, and paperwork preparation costs borne by Qinghai Port and competitors over the past 6 years. So our initial timeline says about 5 years, but this one mentions 6 years.
6 years.
I wasn't sure.
Even better. 6 years even better.
It's even better. Okay, good. So right. So this is kind of relevant, I think, in analyzing change in storage, loading, and paperwork preparation costs, because these are the 3 main kind of components of that thing, of the ports, and the costs. So I think it's helpful.
But recall, you rightly explained that the problem is revenue. And this option is about costs. So costs won't be able to explain revenue. Costs could explain profits or losses, that's right. But we're talking about revenue, the top line, not the bottom line.
I see, yeah. Well, that makes sense. Okay, so this is not helpful. But we don't know whether it's least helpful or not. So
that's right. That's right.
Yes. So far, we know that A is a contender. So the next one is analysis of the number of containers processed monthly over the past 20 quarters by Qinghai Port by type, with further deep dive into major shifts. So this timeline is 5 years, and of the number of containers processed monthly over the past. So this is helpful. This is helpful for us because it is talking about number of containers and by type. And since we know that the difference in types of containers actually talks about the volume that we can ship. Like it says, consumer goods ships more containers per month than manufacturers of apparel and electronics. So knowing about the quantity and the type of each kind of container would be helpful for us.
Agree.
In terms of the revenue that we generate from pretty much just the volume of each type may tell us a lot about the revenue.
Yep.
So we'll keep the B for now. Benchmarking of average number of new and old customers served daily by Qinghai Port and competitors over the past 10 years. Now, in the prompt, it says like the CEO of Qinghai Port is talking. He's comparing himself to the competitors on annual basis, I think. Where is that says, but quality of their service lower while the price per container is almost identical. So can reconcile these facts. Somewhere in the prompt it was talking about annual. So I'm pretty much just not sure whether the daily kind of measure would be helpful for us.
Well, I think here the question is even simpler. We're concerned with revenue, so we need to analyze revenue. And the question is, in this particular option, do we have a decomposition of revenue which we could study and analyze? So we know that B is a decomposition of revenue. C,
yeah.
Is C a decomposition of revenue?
Average number of new and old customers served. Well, not really, actually. It's just, I mean, it is new and old customer, recurring and new. You can think of that as this, yeah.
It is, because it's a decomposition of volume into new and old, and revenue is a decomposition into volume and price. So eventually, it's a decomposition of revenue. So yeah, that might be useful. That's a way to analyze revenue. We don't know whether this would be a useful way to analyze revenue or not, but we don't know before we start. Anyway, it might be useful. So that's why I would say that probably useful.
Yeah, and it looks like the time frame doesn't really matter whether it's daily, monthly, yearly, or whatnot.
Yeah. Well, it might matter. It might actually matter, but we will learn it only later. Right now, we don't know. Right now, we need to start somewhere. And we could potentially start with C. Why not?
Yeah, it's just the main concern right now is revenue, and this is a component of revenue. Yeah, okay, I got you now. I understand why. Okay, and the next one is, so we'll keep C as helpful.
Yep.
Then moving on to D, benchmarking of annual average storage, loading, and paperwork preparation time per one container spent by Qinghai Port and competitors over the past 6 years. I think it's helpful as well, because knowing all these kind of benchmarks in terms of paperwork preparation, because they're essentially stages of container transshipment. Yeah, and that talks about volume. Right?
Yeah, that's affects the volume. There's even a simpler explanation why D is relevant, because we can decompose volume into time per container and total time. So that's another way to decompose revenue eventually. So we put a tick mark here.
Yeah, might be useful. Yeah, so it looks like B, C, and D are helpful, and A is secondary, so like least helpful. Yeah,
that's right. Thank you, Grigori. You're right. You are right. Questions?
I just have a quick question, maybe not that relevant to this, but how can you use this pencil or pen here? Because let's say when we do this test in we can't really underline anything and so on. So it would be quite helpful if we can at least circle some words on underline. And now you actually have to write everything on paper, which is a little bit time consuming as well. And I can see now you are actually using some, I don't know, what program are you using?
That's a different program, unfortunately. This is the program used for screencasting and for video conferencing. Yeah. So it's not embedded in Lightserve. Lightserve doesn't have it. Some time ago, I asked them to share their API, which is access to their code, so that I could change everything with my code, but they don't have it, unfortunately, and they don't have this thing. Well, frankly speaking, that would be a pretty complicated application if they had it. But that would be cool. I agree, that would be cool. But anyways, I think it's good that you don't have this opportunity when you do the tests, because some of the tests, especially BCG tests, might be run on a screen, and some tests might be run on the screen. So you'd better be prepared. And if you are prepared for that, and once you get a paper test in a real PST, that would be a super relief, right? You'll be able to solve it easier.
We're going to be smashing it.
Yeah, you won't need circling and underlining. And if you have this opportunity, good. If you don't, you can still show a good result even without this opportunity. So I think that's useful to practice this.
Okay.
Okay, question 6. Question 6. Question 6 goes to Pavel. Explain, please, how you did it. And this is the major thing here, this word %. Pavel, okay, I missed it. Pavel is not here. Sorry. All right. Let me explain this question then, to save time. Remember, we are talking about shares, not about absolute values. So we're talking about the share of labor cost here versus other ports. So in absolute values, this number might be smaller than Shanghai and Maohai, but we don't care. We care about the shares. And the only option that mathematically, which is most rigorously explains this state of affairs, is option D, because it says that everything else decreased. If everything else, 1 minus x, decreased, then necessarily x must have increased in order to accommodate for this change, in order to make sure that 1 minus x plus x equals 1, or 100%. Everything else explains this state of affairs partially. So that explained, for example, process more containers per month. The fact that you process more containers per month does not necessarily mean that you have higher variable costs on labor, because you have also costs on something else. Same thing to a unique introductory training program. Does that mean that the variable cost on labor should be higher? Maybe it should be lower because of the training program. Again, you don't know. Same thing for employee high pay per container. You don't know the number of employees. If there are, for example, lots of employees here and they receive higher pay per container, then that might be an explanation. But if we have few employees who receive higher pay per container, still the variable cost on labor would be smaller, which would contradict this result. So A is half explanation, B is half explanation, C is half explanation, and D is a pretty rigorous explanation. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for the best explanation. And this is D. Questions? My takeaway from this exercise, from this problem, is that you need to really look carefully at what the table is about. The table is about %. It's about shares. It's not about absolute values. And explaining shares is not the same thing as explaining absolute values. Once you realize that we're talking about %, the game changes and your attention to options changes. And then you start considering D. Otherwise, you wouldn't even look at D because it would seem irrelevant.
Yeah, that's exactly right, because we're actually looking at the direct labor cost and not really material, fuel, like admin cost and so on. So, I mean, if they went through operations improvement program, so this will reduce. So what's the impact then on labor?
The labor won't change in absolute value, but its share would increase because everything else decreased.
Yeah, but
it's kind of if a tall person is among other tall people, she would be average. But if somehow she changes her environment and goes to some place where there are a lot of short people, then she would be outstanding tall. Even though before that no one would notice that she was tall.
Yeah, it's true. But here you have for our port it's 13, right? So direct variable cost labor. So it's much more than others. Yeah, that's why. Okay. Makes sense, but it's really a reading between the lines.
Yeah, not only reading between the lines, but also reading the units of measurement.
Yeah.
This is very important, guys. I will repeat it many times. Read units of measurement. Units of measurement matter.
Victor, excuse me. Also, one quick question.
Go for
it. So again, I misunderstood a little bit how we actually, in the question, we need to find the explanation why labor costs have so significant difference in comparison with the competitor side. So how actually D can explain it? Because D, it suggests it covers the option that they go through some program that actually improve their operational so improve some operations. It's operations improvement, and we actually explain only why they have quite a low fixed costs and variable costs like materials, fuel, and so on.
Okay, good question. So why is the share of labor large? The share of labor is large because the share of everything else is small. That's what D is saying.
Direct fixed cost share is really huge.
Huge, yeah, but smaller than competitors. And that does matter because we're talking in comparison terms. The share of labor is comparatively large because the share of everything else is comparatively small. And that's what D is suggesting us.
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
Okay, good. Question 7. Question 7 was easier. Good. I'd like to ask Rinat this time. Rinat, please explain how you solved question 7. Rinat, I think you need. Yeah, now it's working.
Yeah,
now it's working. Fire away.
Well, please let me 5 seconds to relocate because it seems in a couple of seconds I'm gonna have loud here. So the question 7, which of the following statement would not be a potential reason for the same share of overhead costs across 3 ports in table 2? Okay. So I'm gonna go to the exercise. Would not be a potential reason for the same share of overhead. Okay, well, for a couple of seconds. Oh. Okay, yeah, I'm back to you. So we have to find what is not a potential reason for the same share of overhead cost. At first, I'm going to check the overhead costs, and they are exactly the same. So we need to find what is not a potential reason for the same overhead costs. So let's start from A.
The same share, the same fixed share of overhead costs to total costs.
Okay. Yeah, all right. So number A is about SG&A costs is a function. Okay, number A says that the overhead costs are outsourced to other providers for a fixed rate on each dollar of its client's overall expenses.
Fixed rate.
Yeah, all right. It seems to have because it's a fixed rate on each dollar of its client's overall expenses. It's not a fixed rate in dollars. It's a fixed rate as a percentage of overall expenses. It means correct.
Correct.
All right. So we have to find not a potential reason. Okay. So A is the reason. Then B, government regulation for all infrastructure companies to allocate a specific share, a specific share of their costs to SG&A expenses, which means B is correct too. So we have to decide between C and D. All right, C. All three ports follow the industry convention, blah, 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 or the specific number. All right, it seems C is not the reason because it's being said that they put as a specific number of dollars per container processed. So, which means, let's say if they have different number of containers processed, they will have different number of total costs, but it might not be the same share. So for now, I think C is not the reason, but I'm gonna check D.
Okay.
And D is saying that, so we cannot exceed 9% of total cost. All right, D is saying about the share, A and B are saying about the share, and only C is not saying about the share. So I would say C is the correct answer in that case.
You're right. I would add only that D is half correct because it's talking about the upper bound, not the lower bound. Not exactly 9, but not more than 9. Well, if there were no C, we would choose D as our answer because that would be the weakest explanation. But because we have C, which is weaker, we choose C. Yeah. Thank you, Renat. That's it. Questions? All right.
C is really about, because it doesn't talk about share. Right? It talks about this, the absolute value of dollars. So this word share of overhead costs should ring the bell, and then this we should then look.
Right, but again, I wouldn't tell you to count exclusively on heuristics, like searching for a specific word in an option, saying that, that means that that's the right answer. Here you need to understand the context. The context is that we're talking about a fixed rate to the total costs. And the fixed rate to the total cost is guaranteed by A and B, and to a certain extent by D. And it is not guaranteed by C. So that's why C is our choice. There is an indication, the word share is an indication, a hint, you rightly said, but it's not the real explanation, it's not the real reason. You always need to dig to find the real reason, not a roundabout. Roundabout is great, but it's to the wrong answer. So be careful.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Question 8, and that should be pretty easy, I think. Question 8, yeah, it is pretty easy. Okay, but still someone got it wrong. So let's discuss. Mireille, it's your turn. Please guide us through question 8.
Hi all. Regarding the question 8, which of the following reasons, if true, would best explain the difference in the factory port cost incurred by manufacturers?
Okay.
My option is D. But let see it in order. The first one, the majority of manufacturers who ship goods through the free ports are located within 50 miles from Qinghao. This contradicts with the costs which relate to Qinghao, which is 1.5 more.
Yeah, exactly. Qinghai is more expensive. So
yeah,
and A suggests that it should be less expensive. Yeah, agree.
Yes. The second one, crane equipment in the Qinghai port is outdated. Therefore, vessel loading procedures take significantly more than time. But the vessel loading procedures not to the factory to port, but to the local port processing.
That's right. It's about local port processing. Yeah, it goes here.
Yeah, the sea Qinghai's position relative to major sea routes from China to Europe, it's also destination port or maritime transport. This is part.
Yeah, I think it's maritime transport. Yeah, so it's not.
Yeah, and the fourth one is the administrative border, which between Qinghai and Maintain. This explains the higher custom clearance and higher cost factory to port. That's all.
Yeah, that's right. There's something related to factory support which might lead to high costs borne by customers at Qinghai here. Yeah, that's right. The right answer. Yep. Thank you, Mary. Questions?
Yeah.
A question.
Yes, please.
Option B, the crane equipment is outdated.
Yep.
What if it leads to congested traffic in front of the port? You know, you bring your goods there and then your truck waits for like 10 additional hours.
Well, that's a far-fetched assumption. In theory, it could work this way, but you could also say that there's also always storage. So you bring your goods, your containers to the port, you leave them in the storage, and the goods wait there. And then the truck leaves. And then factory support is not affected. And what is affected is local port processing.
Okay. Yeah, good.
So I think your idea is pretty creative in a good sense. And this is something you would really want to share in an interview. Alternative explanation. Very good. But here the explanation should be simpler.
Well, I did answer D, but now just for the sake of
playing devil's advocate. Yeah, that's good. That's a valid thought, and share this thought in an interview. That's what I would say. All right. Question 9. Question 9 goes to whom? To Valentin. Please guide us through question 9.
Yeah, so which of the following ideas would not help address the difference in the total cost of shipping in containers by Chinese manufacturer through Qinghai versus competing port, as indicated Exhibit 1? So just looking options one by one. Encourage manufacturer to use a cheaper mode of transportation like railway when shipping goods from their premises to the port. It could help. Just we remember from previous questions that transportation from factory to port still is still higher than its competitors. Use the government participation to lobby local authorities. Option B also could help us, again, keeping in mind previous question and this problem in between Qinghai and mainland. So it's probably also could help to solve the first link of the chain. Then negotiate more favorable financial terms of container processing for Chinese manufacturer. Question mark. I do not understand how it could help to reduce the costs for Qinghai.
Well, it could help Qinghai, but it could also help everyone else because specifically Qinghai. Yeah, it said helps all other ports at the same level. And develop and implement cost reduction initiatives in the port in order to subsequently reduce the price. It's like connected to the cost reduction operationally, so it also could help. So for me, option C is the weakest one. So that's right. Agree.
Based on the common sense.
Thank you, Valentin. That's right. Questions?
Thank you.
All right, no questions so far, which brings us to the next test. And the next test, I think, is a bit easier because it's about calculations. Calculations are always easier to discuss. Question 1. Question 1 goes to Valentin again. How did you solve it? Valentin? Will you guide us through?
I forgot to turn. Yeah. If total number of IHR exhibit were to grow at 2% per year in the future, which of the following best minimum required annual growth in the financial sector revenue that would represent more than half of total revenue in terms? 2% per year, we have to estimate this 2% per year growth for total. There is some trick way to calculate it. I have just to and if it's a formula, it have to be something like.
That's the rule of 72 for shares, right? There's a video on that. I suggest you watch the rule of 72 in general, and then there is a subsection on shares. So here, that would be pretty straightforward, right? We need to take these guys, 5.3, and right now this is 1/4, and that needs to be 1/2. So that should double.
It needs to be doubled.
Yeah, and then this is the speed of doubling, roughly, equals 72. -2 because something is, the base is growing by 2%, and we are growing by X. So our share is growing by roughly, well, this is pretty roughly, but for our purposes, that's okay, by X -2. Imagine you are running at, I don't know, 6 miles per hour. And a dog is running behind you at 10 miles per hour. It's a fast dog. And then the speed with which the dog is catching up with you is 4 miles per hour. So this is kind of an intuition why I have X -2, not just X. So X -2 times 10 is 72, rule of 72, and then X is 9.2. And the smallest number bigger than 9.2. So that's the trick. And I suggest that you watch the video because there's the trick explained in lots of detail with with a few examples. Questions?
Victor.
Yep.
Yeah, congratulations. Like you managed to trick me with this question because I actually watched the video right before the test.
Yeah.
And I just skipped because the question looks almost identical to the one that you are explaining in the video.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't pay attention that it's 2%, not 5% overall growth. I just went directly to the answer.
Okay. Very good. Yeah. That's why you need to read questions carefully, even though you think the question is familiar. Sometimes that is very relevant to interviews. If the case sounds familiar, be careful, because it might actually be different to what you're familiar with. So always approach a question or an interview case or test as something you haven't seen before. Otherwise, there's the trap of familiarity. Any questions, guys? Not yet. Okay, let's go for question 2. Question 2 and 3. Question 2. Natasha, please guide us through question 2. Yeah, through question 2.
Yes. So question 2. Assume that Cuba's gross national income is equal to the annual income of all its citizens, according to Exhibit 2. Which of the following is the closest estimate of Cuba's GNI? What did I do? I did some calculations here. Citizens. So we have 80,000 people. I'm just trying to make sense of what I did here.
Yeah, 80,000 people, then each quintile, which is 1/5.
Yeah, so it's divided by 5. It's 16,000. Yes, and then I think I just multiplied average annual income. Yeah. So you just need 16,000 times 2 million plus 16,000 times 3.5 and so on.
That's right. And you get something like 100. 100 times 16K times 1 million. And that should be 1,625 billion. That's the formula.
Yep.
And that's the answer. Yep. Thank you, Tashi. That's it. Questions? Question 3 is actually pretty similar to question 2, and I would like to show you a way to solve it quickly without any calculations whatsoever. So first thing, we need to understand what's going on in question 3, because once we understand that, we know the answer. So what we are saying in question 3 is that quintile 1 increases from 2 to 3.5, quintile 2 from 3.5 to 6, quintile 3 from 6 to 20, and then quintile 4 from 20 to 70. And we need to understand what the total of these lines times 16K is. Notice that each red line is smaller than the following gray line. That's pretty straightforward, right? So the overall value for 16K times the sum of these lines will be smaller than this number here. But the only number that's smaller than 1,625 billion is A. Everything else is bigger. So the answer is A. And you don't need specific calculations here, dedicated calculations to question 3. You can just use your imagination, so to speak, your mathematical imagination to figure out what's going on, and then test the options and see that only one option works. Questions?
Do I understand correct that the amount of people in we have to double amount of people in quintile 4 and 5, so it will be not 16,000, it will be 32,000 of people.
No, you don't. Eventually, quintile 5 will be 32,000. Yeah, but then it ceases to be a quintile. That would be a different thing. That would be a duoquintile. I don't know. I just made up the word. That would be a different thing. But technically, yeah, that would double.
Sorry, Victor, can you please just explain again? So this A, so it's the only number that is smaller. So you compare it with question 2.
Yeah.
And answer C.
Yeah.
Right? And then this is the only number that is smaller from...
Yeah, so why are we making this comparison? Question 2.
Because we're just looking at the difference, these red lines and gray lines.
Yeah. So the total number is the total of these gray lines, yeah? And this is what we got in question 2. The total of gray lines.
Yes.
The differences is what we're looking for in question 3. And the differences are those red lines. And the red lines, the differences, are smaller than the gray lines, the totals. Therefore, the answer that we're looking for in question 3 is smaller than what we have in questions. Hence the answer.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks.
Other questions? Okay, now questions 4 and 5. Oh, they should be pretty straightforward. Question 4 is actually ranking. Question 4 goes to Anton. Anton, please explain how you solved question 4.
How should competitors 1 to 5 be ranked according to? You basically just divide your average revenue by your average costs.
That's right.
Like, do you want to organize another course for like simple calculus or arithmetics?
Well, we have a calculus on math, actually, a course on math, but it's in Russian, unfortunately. But there is one.
Yes, for me, it would be a problem, of course.
Yeah, yeah, for you it wouldn't be a problem. And it's taught by a guy who's better at math than I am. I'm pretty bad at math and at mental math, frankly speaking. I'm good at lazy math, at avoiding math altogether. But calculations, well. But now since this guy is not here, let's try to tackle this question with the means we have, right? How would we do that? Well, first thing we need to understand who is the biggest. Is it 4 or 3? 4 is 28 over 3, which is more than 9, right? And 3 is 21 over 3, which is about 7. So 4 is bigger. So C is out. And then what we need to compare is 3 and 1. Who is bigger, 3 or 1? 1 is just 5, slightly more than 5, while 3 is about 7. Sorry, this is 5, this is 7. So obviously 3 is bigger. So B is out. The only thing we need to compare right now is 2 and 5.
Excuse me, A is out.
You're right. You're right, sorry. So B is left and A and D is left. This is a fair statement that you made because B is actually the right answer. And the final thing that you need to do is to compute 9 and 7 over 2.2 and then 2. 13.4 over 2.9. And this is where you need to make explicit calculations, unfortunately, because the numbers are pretty similar. I will skip those calculations right now for the sake of time and for just not to spoil the impression of my math skills, because I might screw this up once I do it. But the answer would be B. I think we can also safely skip 5 because there is nothing I can tell you in terms of speed, unfortunately. There is no shortcut. All you need to do is sum these guys up, take the average, and then compare the number to this value here. And that would be again 14%. But there's no trick. It's just take your time, do the calculations, get the answer. Which is different from question 6, which might have some, so to speak, roundabouts. So let's discuss that one. And question 6 goes to Rinat. Rinat, please explain how you solve question 6.
Hi all. All right. So question 6 is, assuming blah 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 could reach the highest effectiveness included in exhibit 4, by what percentage could its current effectiveness be increased? All right. So the current effectiveness is roughly, I would say, 6.5. Wait, no, if we multiply 4 by 6, we're going to get 24 plus 3. Yeah. No, it's 6 exactly.
Now, I would be a bit more careful. 4.5 times 2 is 9, and 9 times 3 is 27. This is slightly less than 27, so I would say that the current effectiveness is something like 5.9.
Yeah, but it's pretty close to 6.
Yeah. Just bear this in mind, because our calculations would lead to something smaller than actual number. We need to remember that we rounded things up a bit.
Yeah, okay. Right now we have to calculate the highest effectiveness. Well, the highest is, I would say, competitive 7, because its effectiveness is more than 10. But probably there is.
Yeah, that's enough. That's the only one competitor who has more than 10. Everything else, everyone else is smaller than 10. This is
we have
the hyperplane. The hyperplane. Yeah, remember our first discussion is 10.
Yeah, all right. So we have roughly 6 and roughly 10. So to come from 6 to 10, we have to increase by 4, and 4 out of 6 roughly is 66%. And so the closest. So right now we have B and C left, and we have to decide between B and C. But well, our effectiveness is slightly less than 6, and competitor's 7 effectiveness is more than 6, which means we have a higher gap between us, which means the actual B.
That's right. The actual answer is B. Oh, sorry, C. Yeah, B is out. Yeah, agree. Thank you, Renat. Questions? So this is the time where lazy math could work, and it did work. Question 7 is another instance of lazy math. Let's have a look. And well, you tackled the question pretty well. Very good. I would like to ask Grigorio this time. Why don't you tackle this question right away? And I'll give you a hint. You don't need to do calculations here.
Yeah, I actually thought of like not doing any calculations, so I thought that option A was the closest in line with like everything else. So I just chose option A.
No, be more careful. Be careful with units of measurement. You're right that this thing should be close to everything else. That's right. But this is thousands of dollars. Singapore dollars. So that means the answer is adding 3 zeros, D.
Oh, you're right. Okay.
Don't forget about units of measurement.
Details. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Details. Guys, questions?
Yes. How did we get this 3,600 in segment D?
Okay.
Because you have total. This is average revenue.
Yeah, I've looked at everything else and noticed that our answer should be something similar.
Okay.
Not different by an order of magnitude. The answer is by orders of magnitude. Okay, so we're close to the final questions. Question 8. Question 8 goes to whom? To Natasha. Please explain how you solved question 8. Question 8. How did you tackle it?
Question 8. How did we do? So, based on the information the team has collected, How many taxis are needed to meet the daily demand for taxi services? Oh, I did lots of calculations, but then actually I ran out of time and I selected the end. I think here I got a little bit lucky, to be honest. Yes, but I did try to calculate. So, so we have altogether 100,000 passengers daily, and then from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. there are so 4 hours, and we have 30% of daily demand. And then I said,
let's look here.
Yeah,
this is a bigger number.
So many calculations, but for sure there is a shorter way.
Yeah, you just need to understand that there is a bottleneck that we need to tackle.
Yes.
And once we see this bottleneck, 4 hours, and we know that one taxi takes 1 hour to serve one passenger, that means that we have that each taxi should make at least 4 rides. So we need 40K over 4 rides per taxi equals 10,000K. This is 10,000 taxis. This is the number of taxis we need at least. Because a taxi cannot make more than 4 rides in these 4 hours, because each ride takes exactly 1 hour. So the best we could aim at is this number of taxis. But if we have 10,000 taxis, then we would easily cover the remaining intervals. We would easily serve this interval and this interval. So D would be safely the answer. But we could not use fewer taxis than 10,000 because otherwise we wouldn't be able to serve this interval, the rush hour, the rush 4 hours, so to speak. So that's why the answer is D. Questions, guys? Okay, final question for today. Question 9. Only Rinat got it right. Okay, Rinat, please, how did you do it? Show us your thoughts.
Wait a second. All right, number 9. So this is, so we have to calculate the break-even point. So let's go to the tax to get some details from it. So we have fixed cost, $3.5 million. So we have 12K of dollars per car. So I transferred from monthly costs to annual costs. 12K per car. 6 rides per day, 1.8K rides per year. So I multiplied 6 by 300, and I got 1.8 thousand rides per year, and each ride is $8. So I multiply 1.8 by 8, and I'm gonna get roughly 8,000 plus 6,400, which is 14,400. I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So which means one car brings us a total value of. So I deduct from 14,000, 14,600. I deduct 12,000 because so our revenue per car is 14,000 euros in dollars. The cost are 12,000. So which means one car brings us 2,600, if I'm not mistaken, because I don't have a things to write right now. I'm doing
okay, so I think you're almost here. So you arrive at the equation 2.4x equals 3.5k.
Yeah. I think
the easiest way to solve it is just to plug in the different numbers. And you notice that A is already okay. Everything else yields a bigger number than would suit the equation. So everything else is out. The only answer is A.
Yeah.
Again, the bottom line here is that you start with the generic equation first. The generic equation in break-even situation is revenue equals costs. You then describe what revenue is, what costs is, and then you equate revenues to costs. And then you make some transformations and then arrive at a very simple equation from which you can find X. And you know that X is the answer because sometimes the answer is something else. Answer could be, for example, and you will see it later, 1.5x or 2x or 12x, I don't know, anything. But in our situation, X is exactly what we're looking for. X is the answer. All right, guys, questions? Well, no questions. As I said, the math part is easier than the premise part. Premise part yields more discussion. But I want to thank all of you guys for active participation. That's great that you ask so many questions and that you challenged me on different occasions, because this is how we can learn things and this is how we can discover different traps and tricks. If you don't ask questions, I don't know what to talk about. But once you do, it becomes easier and more interesting. Anything you wanted to ask in general about anything?
Yes, I actually wanted to find out, like, what is the fastest time, like the soonest we should expect the videos to be uploaded?
Well, I hope tomorrow we'll be able to upload the videos, because they're already being produced on my computer, but unfortunately it takes a few hours to upload. I think we should. Will I be able to use my laptop tomorrow? Well, I would say that Tuesday is comfortably the time when the videos will be there. I think Monday would also be possible, but I'm not sure if I will let my computer work so much, because I'll need to travel a bit and have my laptop closed. I would say Tuesday.
Okay.
All right, guys, then. Thank you very much for our session today. Look forward to see you next week and look forward to receiving your homework. Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers,
Thank
guys.
you, Victor. Bye.
Bye.